Sox in the basement.
Did you see the picture on Instagram of Pope Leo? This is the biggest White Sox fan in the history of White Sox fans because he's the Pope. But Pope Leo XIV was given a gift by the leader of the Assyrian Church. And this guy gave him a Cubs jersey, custom Cubs jersey, and then posted it
so close
on Instagram of him and the Pope while the Pope is holding his Leo XIV Cubs jersey. And the message underneath it is, I had the joy of meeting His Holiness Pope Leo XIV at the Vatican this morning, along with a delegation of bishops and priests from our holy church. During the exchange of gifts, I presented the Pope with a customized Cubs jersey and hat in honor of all of our North Side Chicagoans. Needless to say, the Pope enjoyed his gift very much. The Pope looks disgusted. He
doesn't look happy.
The Pope is disgusted. If you're looking at the video on YouTube, I'm putting it up right now. That is not a happy man. That is a man who is like, this is my job as the Pope, to talk with the leaders of these other churches and to make peace and like to take this stupid picture with this stupid jersey. And that was thrown in a drawer someplace, maybe burned with a holy fire, maybe blessed to make sure that it doesn't curse him and his White Sox fandom. He looks like every White Sox kid that ever comes in contact with Cub gear, like when they're in the 3rd or 4th grade and they feel like they need to wash their hands right away because it ruins their White Sox fandom to touch it. That's what the Pope looks like in that picture.
Yeah, you're right. It's every kid who on the big family Christmas party, there's an aunt who's like, well, I know you like baseball, so here's a Mark Grace jersey for you.
Right.
And you're like, no, thank you. And, and then, you have to make the happy face for the picture, but inside everybody knows that, holding it is killing you. Just a small amount, not all at once.
It was an intentional slight. See, that's the thing. This is the patriarch of the Assyrian Church of the East, His Holiness Mar Awa III, who comes from Chicago as well. And he knew what he was doing. He went to see the Pope, but he messed with the Pope. The Pope got messed with. And then Instagram. Good for him. He got IG'd after Instagram the Pope and basically forced him to hold that jersey. And the Pope looks disgusted. That's a guy who's in pain. He's like, I got to smile, but this is my I don't want to smile, but I got to smile for the picture post. The moment that was taken, I imagine His Holiness Pope Leo XIV taking that jersey and throwing it into a corner.
Do you think the Pope has a laundry chair? The chair of the stuff that you're probably not going to wear it anytime soon, or it's just going to sit there.
I'm telling you, look, that went into the box for the poor. That's what that did. That went into the donation box for the poor. Right now, there's some poor kid that's wearing a Leo XIV Cubs jersey running around in the inner city of Rome because he got that from his parents the next day. When they went down to the Italian version of the Goodwill. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I could see that.
In other news, Tim Elko, ACL surgery. This is really weird. He hurt this in the middle of the year and decided to go with rehab so he could get back and play, but he never really made it back up to the majors, and now he's had surgery, and it's an 8-month recovery time, and I think Tim Elko made a terrible mistake because this team is not going to wait around to see if he can become a first baseman on their major league team. They weren't super excited about him last year. Remember, it took long for him to get up there. They gave him a shot. It didn't work out. He plays through the injury. He never really makes it back. And now he goes and he gets the surgery. He needed to be well for spring training, Ed, so that he could give it a shot to try to make it on the roster. I think he's made a terrible decision waiting.
Oh, yeah. The worst thing that you could do as a young player in this situation with this particular team is not be ready for spring training. It's open competition next year, given the fact that they're coming off of another 100-loss season. You're fighting for 500 and respectability. And if Tim Elko wants to cement himself as the DH, wants to cement himself as a first baseman, he needed to come out and earn it in spring training, because by the time he gets back, rehabs, and spends some time at Charlotte, even if he crushes down in Charlotte, it's not necessarily going to translate into an automatic call up to the White Sox. It's not going to necessarily translate into anything for him because they, like you said, they waited until it was just like, oh my God, he's hitting it so well. We have to give him a shot. Like, how can we not give him a shot?
Right.
But he did exactly what you could have predicted by the numbers. He came out, struck out way too much, could not put the bat on the ball nearly enough to be effective. And coming off of an ACL, you don't think about this that much with a big dude, but his plant, his base for hitting is a little compromised now. And he's going to have to really rehab that and get it back into baseball shape too, so that he can, be at his optimal, because he's one of those guys, he's got to be at his best, because the home runs will only take him so far. But the White Sox, I don't think under this regime would sacrifice home run power for, a guy that's not getting on base and a guy that has a low batting average and strikes out too much. I don't think they're desperate for that, given the way the team is made up so far, And
we're going to jump into, in just a little bit, some of the free agents that the White Sox may be targeting, at least according to Jim Bowden, former GM, who is now writing for The Athletic. He put out a top 50 list of all the free agents in Major League Baseball and listed the White Sox as candidates to go after some of them. And the list may surprise you of those he believes the White Sox could be going after in the off season. Meanwhile, I want to tell you about Cork and Carry at the Park at 33rd and Princeton in the shadow of the ballpark, a great neighborhood pub during the off season, a great place to be pregame, postgame, in-game during the season, the home of Sox in the basement. And also they've got that great location, 106th and Western, the original location of Cork and Carry, and they are sponsoring the $1,000 guest bounty. That's you getting us a guest. Somebody that you've never heard on this show before, somebody that might be a little difficult to get, doesn't need to be a baseball player, doesn't have to have anything to do with baseball at all, just somebody interesting to bring on the show. At spring training time, we're going to do a vote amongst the fans to find out who brought us the best guest of the offseason. Don Cooper, former White Sox pitching coach, World Series champion, was the first entry so far this offseason. More to come, but if you want to get in on this, and we need to start the process now to get people in a month or two from now. If you want to get in on this, hit us up at soxinthebasement.com or any of our social media. Jump into my DMs and tell me all about the guests you'd like to submit and help us get for the $1,000 guest bounty, brought to you by Cork and Carry at the Park. Before we get to Jim Bowden, though, one other thing of note. The Sox are making more coaching changes, and this is interesting. They have decided to bump out their hitting guys down in the minor leagues. Sherman Johnson, who was the hitting coach for the Orioles, Ryan Fuller, of course, came from the Orioles, our hitting guru, has now signed on with the White Sox, and he is going to be their minor league hitting coordinator. So we continue to see the new guard wait for contracts to expire so they can move guys out and bring in their own. And it's a weird thing, again, because Jerry Reinsdorf basically says, hey, I hired this guy for this, and until his contract is done, we're not going to pay somebody to sit at home. They have to wait for the old guard's contracts to run out to make changes. But now Sherman Johnson comes over with his buddy, Ryan Fuller. Clearly there's a relationship there because both come from the Orioles organization, and he will be the minor league hitting coordinator. I find that to be a positive just from the organization he came from. The Orioles hitters have struggled at the major leagues, but they really excelled in the minor leagues. A hitting coach can only do so much, but if you're telling me we're bringing a guy over who was able to get guys from single A to double A to triple A to become prospects that other teams were trying to get, whether or not it worked out for them yet at the major league level for the Orioles, I want a guy like that who's able to at least develop. And again, since Ryan Fuller's been here, it's been like the first example of, here we have a guy who's a problem in Colson Montgomery. We're going to go do something outside the box with him. And then he goes out and in a half a season is worth more wins above replacement than any other player on the team for their entire season. That's a positive. And we see another guy coming from the Ryan Fuller school to join the White Sox. Well,
it creates cohesion is what it does, right? If your minor league hitting coordinator and your major league hitting coordinator have the same philosophy, that's what you want. And Yeah, the Orioles' struggles at the major leagues, I mean, it's a little concerning. I mean, with Brian Bannister, at least you can look at the Giants and say they've had some really good pitching staffs. The Orioles, it's been a mixed bag with some of these guys coming up, and some of them can hit, but then they've also had a lot of injuries amongst these prospects that have come up. You wonder how much of that has impacted them. And you do wonder, too, how much of it is between the years with those guys, because one of the things that the old regime of the White Sox did was anoint guys as superstars before they even got here. And a lot of the hype around those Orioles prospects was real. And a lot of the hype, though, had to have gotten to them, right? And had to be sitting there messing with them between their ears, because they're sitting there going, they watch Adley Rutschman come up and be great. And if you're Jackson Holliday, you're coming up and sitting there going, I got to match Adley. I got to be as all world as they said I was going to be, or
I think he's going to work out.
Any of them.
I think Holliday works out in the long term.
I think Holliday works out too.
I think he works out. And Kobe Mayo, probably not. Okay. I don't know if he does for the Orioles, but I mean, like that's the thing.
Sam Basallo would be the next one that you watch for the Orioles.
Right. Like, here's the thing. Not all these guys are going to work out. What you want is somebody that develops them and makes them into a highly touted prospect. And then you need internal evaluation where you decide, is this really somebody that we want to turn down all trade offers for? Or is this somebody that we can move to get something better because they do have holes in their approach? They may not make it at the next level. Remember, AAA to the majors is such a big jump. It's a giant chasm compared to single A to AA or AA to AAA. It is a big difference. There could literally be another league in between the two of them. In fact, there kind of is, right? You can go to the KBO and go play baseball in Japan. Right? There's guys that are really good AAA players that have great careers overseas. There's a spot in between Major League Baseball and AAA. That's where those guys end up. That's what that is.
And you hear about quad A players all the time, right? These are the fourth and fifth starters that are barely hanging on major league staffs or are serving as swingmen, because their stuff isn't good enough to be a late inning bullpen arm, and they're not good enough to stick in a starting rotation.
Right. So the main thing is you need to have evaluators. You need to have evaluators that are going to say, all right, this is more trade bait. That's what the Orioles didn't have. Kind of like how the Dodgers are consistently saying, hey, we're going to give up this really good prospect. And then you get them and you go, oh no, what did we trade for? Right. I mean, you need to be that team that makes really good AAA players and then decides which ones deserve to be up here and which ones you move before they lose their luster so you can get something else. That's really the key. You start doing that, you're in the playoffs every year. You're contending for World Series. It's hard to do. You still have to spend some money, but that's a big step in that direction. For exterior windows, doors, patio doors, and storm doors, look no further than Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. No high-pressure sales. Instead of them showing up at your house, making a mess, showing you some dingy example window where they're like, well, this isn't exactly how it would look in your house, but close your eyes and imagine it. And then they tell you they got this great price as long as you get every window done in the house, and you weren't even intending to do that. And then what they're going to do is tell you that price walks out the door with them. And you're not even talking to the guy who owns the place. Forget that. Go to Window and Door Superstore, see everything in full living color, ask all your questions because there's an owner in showroom and on site when the install occurs, and they're using all of their own installers. They don't farm out the work. They've been doing it that way for over 4 decades in Oak Forest since 1985 with all major brands, custom made and no stock items for a perfect fit. If you're getting a window, if you're getting a door, if you're doing something that big with your home, trust Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest, half block east of 159th and Ridgeland at 6280 159th Street. See more at windowdooroakforest.com. Jim Bowden puts out a list, Ed.
Every year.
And these lists, they're not 100%, but you get a former GM writing for The Athletic who puts out his top 50 free agent list, and I can't argue with his where he's got him ranked. He might move somebody up a little bit or move somebody down a little bit, but he's got a pretty good idea. He's got contract predictions. He's got teams that the person best fits with. And the Chicago White Sox don't show up, of course, because they're not going to spend a lot of money because their owner's cheap and it's not the time for it, but also because their owner's cheap. They show up with the 21st overall free agent on the list. That's the first time their name is mentioned as a team that would be a best fit, along with the Tigers, the Giants, the Rockies, and the Angels. Gleyber Torres, second baseman, 29 years old, right-handed hitter, a B WAR of 2.9 which would put him right behind Colson Montgomery last year. He is available, free agent, and Jim Bowden says this is somebody the White Sox may be interested in. And the contract prediction is 4 years, $52 million. And number 22 on that list is Jorge Polanco, 32 years old, with a B-WAR of 2.6 in 2025. So very similar in terms of his contribution. Same agency, by the way, Octagon. Because you're not going to see any Boris like clients on this list. Because anybody with a brain knows that he's not going to give anybody to the White Sox, and Jerry Reinsdorf's not going to deal with him. So that we're talking about Octagon as the agency, and you have Torres and you have Polanco, both listed second baseman, as free agents the White Sox may be targeting or that would be a fit for. And my first reaction is, what about Chase Meidroth?
My first reaction is, why are the White Sox going after two second basemen who, in Bowden's write-up, he says they're both well below average defenders?
Right, exactly. That's not what this team is, right? Like if you've listened to what Chris Getz and the group over at 35th and Shields have said, they want you to play defense. They want you to play defense well, and they value that, especially with a young pitching staff. Look, if you're going to be the kind of team that is not going to go out and spend for dominant starting pitching, like you're not going after Framber Valdez to put him at the top of your rotation. You're not doing that. You're never going to do that. Never while Jerry Reinsdorf is alive are you doing that. And I don't even know if the Ishbias are going to do it after him. But you're never going to do that. You've built...
Thanks, Jamie Navarro.
I mean, you built this entire system, this entire plan around the idea that you're not going to be able to go out and get pitchers that are demanding $300, $400 million over 10 years. You're never going to get that from ownership. So to get an ace or to get a number two even, you likely have to look down in your minor leagues. And they have some candidates down there. We've had folks on that talk about Elijah Evans has come on and talked about he covers all these prospects in the minors. James Fox from Future Sox has come on. He covers all these prospects in the minors. They both have said there's 4 names down there that are real potential number ones and number twos. And you can make an argument that if Drew Thorpe comes back and gets a little bit better, he may slide into that 2 spot as well. There may be 5 names down there that could long-term be towards the top of your rotation. That's what their plan is. If you're going to go on the cheap with pitching, and it's going to be young, you need defense behind the pitching. That is a prerequisite need that you have to have. So there's 2 problems with what Bowden's saying here. I don't argue with the fact that I like Gleyber Torres. I do.
Offensively, I like them both.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Gleyber Torres. I'm a big fan of Polanco. But I don't know if that fits. And again, in bringing one of them into play second base, what you're saying is you don't see Chase Meidroth as anything else except for a utility guy. And long-term, he may just be that. But for all the needs that are there, I'd be surprised if they're going to go out there and throw. And the prediction for both of them, it's 2 years, 26 for Polanco. So $13 million a year for Polanco, or 4 years, 52 is the prediction for Gleyber Torres. Do you think they're really investing that in second base with everything else that they need and the payroll that Jerry Reinsdorf's giving them? I think that's out of town stupid.
That's out of town stupid. It really is, because infield is not their problem. And even look at what's down in the minors, and you see a lot more middle infielders than you do anything else. I think that's just sitting there saying, all right, these guys are cheap enough because it's a Benintendi-esque contract. Okay. And that's really all it is it's for Polanco, it's a short contract at 2 years. For Torres, 4 years at age 29 isn't bad. I mean, it's a Benintendi-like deal. That's all it is. It's just when Bowden's looking at what these guys are probably going to cost under his consideration, he just thinks that this is what the White Sox would spend if they were going to spend it. But yeah, I just don't see how either of those 2 guys makes a lick of sense for the team. And I don't see why Polanco comes to the White Sox for 2 years when he's 32 years old, and you can't tell me that there's not contenders that could use him and that he doesn't want to go there, because this guy's 32 with a history of knee problems, and yeah, he's not spending a couple of years in a rebuild. So I don't see either of these happening.
And Bowden also lists Luis Arias as another target for the White Sox on this list. That's a guy who used to be a second baseman. Now, because of his defense and his age, first baseman, doesn't hit a lot of home runs, used to be a batting champion, right? But again, am I corner infield position on a team that needs more home runs? Why am I investing in a guy that doesn't hit home runs and plays poor defense to stand at first base? Yeah, I'm going to get average. And average is still a valuable thing. I got a guy who's going to get on base. And maybe that's something that the White Sox like. I don't know. But I just don't think that's the fit. You're at that point, you're signing players just to say we signed somebody. I don't know if he's a fit either, Ed.
You know what? This one actually makes a little bit more sense than
you
the
like
other two,
this one.
though.
Okay, shoot me out of the water here. Tell me why.
No, I'm not going to shoot you out of the water. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong about what you're saying about him. But his profile in terms of what he can do at the plate does fit with something that I think Chris Getz probably would put a little bit more of a premium on, which is the guy is an on-base machine, right? He does not swing and miss. He puts the ball in play all over the place, and he would probably like to see that out of a Chase Mydroth, quite frankly. But you're right. His lack of power is going to be an issue, and probably the reason why he doesn't become a good idea per se. But if they signed him and said, okay, this is the guy that we're going to have, around Colson Montgomery, either to help set the table for him with Chase Mydroth, or to sit there and say, maybe this is a guy that's batting behind Montgomery because Colson's got that swing and miss, but he's got that big power. And if you've got a couple of guys on, pick your poison. Do you want to see if Colson Montgomery is going to put one to the concourse, or do you want to see if Luis Arias is going to get a base hit and knock one of these guys in anyway, and you're going to give up a run no matter what? So, when you get a batting profile like that, I mean, I could see some value to it. And at age 28, he could be around a while too.
If I was getting what he had during his All-Star years.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's not a lot of home runs there, right? But he hit 316 and won the batting title in 22. He hit 354 and won the batting title in 23. He hit 314 had the batting title in 24. And his on base percentage was also insane. 420 on base percentage when he was 25 years old. 469 on base percentage when he was 26 years old, and when he was 27 years old, his total on base percentage was 346. The problem is, last year, his on-base percentage drops to 327, and he hits below 300, which means his OPS, because he doesn't have a lot of power, drops below league average.
Right.
So, and that's the thing. If he's not going to be a defensive star and he's going to stand at first base, you need to believe he's got a bounce-back year, actually a bounce-back couple years, right? That he's going to.
I don't think is impossible at age 28.
No, I don't think that's impossible either. That's why I wonder. I mean, he actually has a hard time. I'm rethinking this as we're talking about him, right? His hardest time as a hitter is in San Diego, in Petco Park. There's been a lot of people who said that's a harder...
Which is a cavern.
Right, yeah. It's a cavernous place. Now, that takes down home runs, but then you would also think that it's kind of spread out where you can kind of, I don't know, drop the ball in the gap a little bit more. I don't know exactly how it plays. But I know Petco does have an effect not only on pitchers, but also has an effect on hitters. And so, fly ball pitchers can generally do better in Petco Park because it'll stay in the ballpark. It's more apt to stay in the ballpark.
Right.
So something changed there with him. So if the White Sox are sitting there saying, okay, hold on a second. When he played for the Twins, he was amazing. Comes back into the AL Central, he's amazing. We actually think he's going to hit 320. And he's going to get on base at a 400 clip. And we don't care if he hits home runs because our shortstop's going to hit 50. And we can add home runs someplace else. I mean, he's the most logical one of the three infielders that Jim Bowden talks about. I'll give that. He's the most logical one.
Especially because you could make a case for him if you don't like him at first base, or if he is somehow worse than Lenyn Sosa. You can make a case for Luis Arias just being a DH for a couple of years and then hoping that you find a power hitter that fits into that mold. Or like you said, putting power somewhere else on the field.
Well, he makes a lot of sense if you're moving on from Lenyn Sosa too. If you package Sosa in a trade to get something that you want with somebody else, and you bring in something that you're looking for somewhere else, and you're like, okay, and then Arias is going to stand over at first base and get on base all the time and hit right up at the top. He's leading off. He's an on-base machine. This is what we plan on doing. Or he's batting second, somewhere up there, and he's standing at first base, and he fits a style that you're going for. and your hitting guru is like, we can fix that little blip that we just saw in San Diego and get him back to what he was before he went to the Padres, then they're saying $15 million a year is what Bowden thinks he is. I mean, I'm paying Andrew Benintendi to do a lot worse than that for $15 million a year. So I can see the argument. I can definitely see it. Now, the one that I thought was really interesting was the number 24 free agent on Bowden's list, 29-year-old Trent Grisham, who we just talked about at length on Sox at the Basement. Because we were talking about like Robert Jr., Trent Grisham, the year that Trent Grisham just had 3.5 B-WAR in 2025. His agency is ISE Baseball. This is one of his best seasons of his career just before he goes into free agency. And the White Sox are listed along with four or five other teams as teams that may go after him. He's another 2 years, $30 million, $15 million a year. We always talk about Benintendi's contract as a pretty basic contract, even though Jerry Reinsdorf acts like it's a big amount of money. But if you do trade Luis Robert Jr., this makes sense to me.
Yeah, well, and think about the fact that Chicago, our stadium, the rate, whatever you want to call it, it plays, to a certain degree similar to what he had in Yankee Stadium. I mean, you don't have the short porch, but it's a favorable place for him to continue to hit home runs. He's not going to hit for a high average. I think that idea is gone for Trent Grisham, but he would be a solid center fielder. I mean, Bowden says he's probably a platoon guy, which I would agree with. And you can probably find a right-handed hitting solid center fielder who is not your primary everyday guy, to platoon with him. And in fact, maybe that becomes something that Brooks Baldwin does because he's a switch hitter. Something like this in the absence of Luis Robert Jr., especially until you find the long-term solution at the position, Trent Grisham, if this is a 2-year stopover for him, makes a lot of sense. And Trent Grisham is not a guy, unlike Jorge Polanco, who absolutely has to go to a contender, nor is he necessarily a guy that a contender is going to look at and sit there and go, well, we really believe in what he did with the Yankees, so we're going to pay him a bunch of money and pin our championship hopes on him. The White Sox are sitting there going, as a guy that we invest in for 1 year as a starter, and then maybe 1 year as our fourth outfielder because we found something better, to play in center field, or when Braden Montgomery gets here, Grisham's the odd man out because we're just gonna rearrange the outfield to fit Montgomery in, not at the expense of whoever, Mike Tauchman or whoever. Yeah, he fits the mold of defense. He fits the mold of providing a little bit of offense. And if he's a stopgap for next year and we have him for 2 years and that second year is maybe he's trade bait or maybe not, I'd take it. I don't think he's worth a long-term contract, and I don't think he's going to get one from anyone, which also makes him, pretty nice to look at if you're a guy working for Jerry Reinsdorf and he's got an aversion to the word years.
Yeah, and the other thing is the fact that you're going to get players that are going to come here because they think they have opportunity and it will help them more than they're coming here because they're like, the White Sox are a class organization and we're going to go compete for championships. At this point, that's what you're going to get. All right. And that, I think, leads us to the last guy that I noticed on the list, in case I missed somebody. At 46 in the top 50, Jim Bowden has Adrian Hauser listed as one of the top 50 free agents out there. Remember, he was with the Sox until we traded him to the Rays. And what's really interesting is that he goes 6-2 with a 2.10 earned run average in 11 starts. And then when he gets to the Rays, a 4.79 ERA over 10 starts. And if you think about it, here's a guy who's never had real success, but finished 2025 with a B-WAR of 3.3 games above replacement, wins above replacement. And he got most of that done with the Sox. And Bowden doesn't think he's getting anything more than 1 year and $4 million. And I'm telling you right now, if I could bring back Adrian Hauser for 1 year, $4 million, sign it right now. Because he's going to come in and say, this is the only place I was successful. Promise me you won't trade me and give me a chance to work under Bannister again to figure out what I lost when I got to the Rays, because I want one more chance to make real money in Major League Baseball, and I'm going to have to settle for a 1 year low-paying contract. He signed. They would sign him for that. I'd sign him for that. Do it.
Yeah, and if nothing else, at a 1 year deal, even if he is a guy that would prefer to stay here, so what? So you trade him mid-season and he has to take his chances elsewhere. You can be a little ruthless in this business, but if I'm the White Sox and Hauser has success here, Bannister knows what needs to be done. He can translate that to whoever the major league pitching coach is going to be. And, more to the point, if Hauser and Will Venable have a good rapport with each other, and Hauser's got a good rapport with Kyle Teal and Edgar Caro, and likes throwing to those guys, and that's where some of that success comes into play. Not even necessarily Bannister or the coaching staff, but just, he feels comfortable here and he likes it here, then bring him back, because having a guy that wants to be here is going to be important too, because you have a franchise where people have come out of here grumbling. Players have come out grumbling about how much they did not enjoy their time. And it probably has nothing to do with the other guys in the clubhouse, but it's just a feeling. But if you can get rid of that feeling, if you're Will Venable, because you've got veterans who enjoy being on the south side of Chicago and want to be around this team, hey, all the better, all the better.
As we get to the Sox nerd, just something I just saw on the internet I have to bring up. Blake Snell being asked about his World Series start where he gives up 5 earned runs the day after. His quote is, "They didn't really get to me. Luck plays in baseball."
Wait, this is the same Blake Snell that gave up back-to-back home runs to start the game,
because
right?
It was luck. It wasn't him. It was the one-armed man, Ed. That's amazing. That music means the Sox nerd, Dave Marin, is on the line right now. He gives you all those tidbits and trivia nuggets on the scoreboard at the rate, and he's with us each and every week here on Sox in the Basement to give you even more, brought to you by the Village of Lamont. Want to experience a downtown with real history, great eats and drinks, and green spaces filled with adventures? Visit the Village of Lamont. Shop, dine, drink, explore. This is one of those places to be during the holiday season. The downtown area, incredible. It's small town America just outside of the city, and you can see everything that they're doing there at lamontdowntown.com. Nerd, what do you got for me?
Chris, what a difference a year makes. 365 days ago, Sox Nation, including myself, was questioning whether Miguel Vargas should be in the big leagues, let alone a part of the Sox future. But after a promising 2025, Vargas is positioned to be a Sox cornerstone as the franchise claws its way back to respectability. To refresh, Vargas struggled mightily after he was acquired by the Sox from the Dodgers on July 29, 2024. In his first 64 games, which is a decent sample size, Vargas hit an anemic .117 with only 2 homers and a pathetic .406 OPS. In addition, he was striking out 26% of the time. What made this so discouraging was that 22 of those 64 games came at the start of 2025. Vargas slashed .139, .236, and .203 with no homers to start 2025, leaving me thinking that this is 2024 Vargas all over again. Vargas finished up strong, hitting .252 with a .331 on-base percentage and a .438 slugging percentage over his final 116 games of 2025. In addition, Vargas hit 16 homers with 27 doubles and was successful on all 5 of his stolen base attempts. While doing that, Vargas was playing third, first, DH, and a little bit of left field, and he hit in each of the first 6 spots of the batting order. What else can I say about 2025 Vargas? His OPS was 200 points higher on the road than it was at home. That's .615 at home and .815 on the road. Vargas's hitting stats while playing first and third were essentially the same. His defensive stats were not the same and would dictate that maybe first base is the place for Vargas moving forward. He made his most starts, that's 45, in the cleanup spot and hit .250 with a .330 OBP, a .448 slugging percentage with 9 home runs. Vargas was most productive in the 2 spot, however, slashing .267, .358, and .522 with 3 homers in 25 starts there. Vargas hit 11 of his 16 home runs with men on base. I got a lot of mileage out of this stat on the old scoreboard as it took shape throughout the season. He also socked 12 of his 16 homers against teams 500 or better. One thing Vargas did to really endear himself to Sox fans in 2025 was kill the Cubs. His .455 average last season was the 6th highest Sox output against the Northsiders and his 1,600 slugging percentage at Wrigley Field was the second highest output in Sox history, behind Jose Abreu's unreal number of 2,083 in 2020. On an unrelated note, I was disappointed with Toronto manager John Schneider pulling Chris Bassett one successful inning shy of a save in Game 4 of the World Series. Bassett would have joined Mark Burley, who did it in 2005, and Goose Gossage, who did it in 1981 for the Yankees, as the only pitchers drafted by the Sox to earn a World Series save. Bassett was the Sox 16th-round pick out of Akron in 2011. Before I get to my zinger, let me remind you I am posting 2025 player reviews, 2025 nuggets, birthday updates, a daily Sox list, and almanac items on Twitter and on my WordPress blog, which you can link to at soxinthebasement.com. In honor of the 20th anniversary of the World Champions, I'm going to zing about that team, throwing out some gems you may not know about the 2005 Sox. Were there any members of the 2005 Sox who had Vargas-like improvements? While relievers Neil Kotz and Cliff Polite weren't as bad in 2004 as Vargas was in 2024, they improved immensely in 2005. Without that vast improvement, it's doubtful the Sox would have won the World Series. Kotz's ERA went from 5.65 in 04 to 1.94 in 05, while his WAR soared from a negative 0.4 in 04 to 2.0 in 05. Polite dropped his ERA by over 2 runs from 04 to 05, while his WHIP went from 1.4 in 04 to 0.9 in 05. This will be my last zing commemorating the 2005 champs. Remember, Sox, don't ever stop believing. That's it, fellas. More than you probably wanted to know about Miguel Vargas, Cub Killers, and World Series saves.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.